Welcome to Kindly Neurodivergent with Kay. Before we begin, I respectfully request that if you witness any pauses during this show, please continue watching. I'm composing a spontaneous comment or question, someone's processing their thoughts, in addition to repeating something that was unintelligible or misunderstood. It is natural discourse, and we can choose not to say anything while this is occurring. The experiences we discuss on this show are for educational purposes only. Please do not substitute them for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Today, Shannon Urquiola is here with me. She will be discussing how to move from fear and uncertainty to acceptance and resilience when raising an autistic child. Welcome, Shannon.
Thank you so much, Kay. I'm so excited to be here today.
Please introduce yourself.
Well, my name is Shannon Urquiola, and I am the founder of Not Your Average Autism Mom, a national nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting families living alongside autism through education and coaching and advocacy and community. Our organization includes a private membership community for moms raising autistic children. I also host the Not Your Average Autism Mom podcast, where I share weekly episodes to help moms feel more understood and less alone and more confident navigating this journey. And beyond the community side, I'm also deeply involved in media and advocacy work, sharing honest stories and resources to help shift the conversation around autism parenting nationwide.
Well, awesome. How did you come up with the name?
Well, my journey began when Jordan was diagnosed with autism at 5 years old. He's 29 now. And back then, things were so different. There wasn't much information, and what I did find often painted just a really grim picture of the future. And I remember being really overwhelmed and terrified and completely alone. And, over time, I think I realized that Jordan didn't need to be fixed. He needed to be understood. And that shift really changed everything for me. That experience kind of deepened my understanding of what lifelong parenting really looks like, which ultimately inspired me to create Not Your Average Autism Mom because I wanted to be different. So that's where the name came from.
Isn't 5 a late diagnosis?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Isn't 5 a late diagnosis?
Isn't 5? I'm confused.
Jordan was a late diagnosis.
Well, he was diagnosed, actually, Kayla, he was diagnosed with PDD-NOS when he was 3, and then he got the official diagnosis when he was 5.
Mm. Can you share your journey with your son Jordan and how it led to the creation of Not Your Average Autism Mom?
Sure, absolutely. So, my journey began when he was diagnosed, like I said, at 5 years old. And, I think at the time, I remember I wanted so badly to fix things, to find answers, to somehow make life look the way I thought it was supposed to. But like I said, over time, I realized that he didn't need to be fixed. And, our lives have been full of ups and downs. We had many school challenges and advocacy battles, and one of the biggest turning points for me came much later when I had to pursue legal guardianship. And that was one of the hardest pills that, you have to swallow as a parent, because you go into motherhood with these dreams of your child growing up and moving out and building a life of their own. And then suddenly, you're faced with this reality that you'll be making decisions for them for the rest of their life. And it's an emotional process, even when you know it's the right thing. And I think, that's what really led me to start Not Your Average Autism Mom. I wanted to build the resource that I wish I had had, one that offered both practical and emotional understanding so that no mom, ever feels like she's walking this road alone.
I am sure it is hard. Did you always want to be a nonprofit?
Yes, that was something that I always knew in my heart that I wanted to do, because I wanted to do something that people knew that when they were donating to us, that all of it was going back to the families living this journey.
Mm, mm.
How can parents move from fear and uncertainty after a diagnosis to acceptance and confidence? And what insights from your early parenting years might help guide them?
That is such a powerful question, because that moment when you hear the diagnosis, it changes everything. There's so much fear of the unknown. And I really think that it starts with giving yourself permission to feel everything. The diagnosis moment can feel like the ground shifts from underneath of you, and it's full of grief and confusion and fear about the future. And that's all normal. So I think one of the most important things I've learned is that acceptance isn't a one-time decision. It's something that you choose over and over again. It's not about saying, I'm okay with everything about this, but instead, I'm choosing to meet my child where they are instead of where I thought they would be. And I think that in my early years, I spent a lot of time resisting reality. I was chasing normal, trying to make Jordan fit into a world that didn't yet know how to make space for him. And so that created a lot of frustration for both of us. And I think when I finally let go of what I thought motherhood was supposed to look like, that's when our lives really began to feel settled.
What helped you switched?
I think the shift happened when I started focusing less on why and more on what now. Acceptance isn't about liking everything that comes with the diagnosis. It's about learning to see your child for who they are and not who you thought they would be. And I think that resilience comes from choosing acceptance. Once you stop fighting what is, you can start building a life that really works for your family.
Yeah.
You often discuss the expectation gap. Can you explain what this means and what mindset shifts help parents manage expectations in daily life?
Sure. I think the expectation gap is one of the biggest emotional hurdles that I see for parents. It's that space between the life that we imagined and the one that we're actually living. And I always say that that gap is where frustration lives, where guilt and anger and sadness often take root. And, when Jordan was younger, I had all these expectations about how things should look. But the truth is, it wasn't autism that was breaking my heart. It was my expectations of what I thought life would look like. So, and I always say it's not about lowering your expectations, it's about aligning them with the truth. Most of our emotional pain doesn't come from what's happening. It comes from what we believe should be happening. So, when parents learn to close that gap to meet reality instead of resisting it, I think everything feels lighter. You can still, hope and dream and work towards goals, but you stop suffering over the difference between expectation and reality.
What does life look like today?
Well, I will say that, I think that for me, my life is kind of a mix of routine and reflection. I think that Jordan and I both, we thrive on structure, both of us. But I also make time for myself and I recharge by, connecting with people who fill my soul. And I think honestly, my work keeps me grounded and the work I do fills me up. Every time I share our story, I feel like it's another piece of purpose kind of being lived out.
These are not typical dinner table conversations.
What what are not typical dinner time conversations? I'm sorry.
Connections help.
Yeah, I think, Kayla, I think some of the biggest stressors that I see, are comparison and guilt and feelings of not doing enough. Moms compare their child's progress and their parenting and their families. And honestly, it's all really exhausting. So I think awareness, when you catch yourself thinking, I should be doing more or this isn't fair, I always say pause and ask, is this thought helping me or is it hurting me? And most of the time, those thoughts are just draining your energy and just make everything feel heavier.
How do you guide moms in balancing their parenting role with maintaining their own identity and well being?
I think that, a really powerful tool is for them to set boundaries and not just with others, but with themselves, right? They don't have to say yes to every request or every event or every therapy. Rest along this journey is not optional. I think it's part of the plan. And I think it's really important that they find their people, the ones who truly get it and understand. And I believe that community and coaching make such a difference because you can really learn to manage stress differently when you have support and when you realize that you don't have to carry it all alone.
or figuring out what goals are realistic to achieve with your child.
Yeah, I think that when you're doing that, I think it's that expectation gap, right? Like focus on the now and not on 10 years from now, right? I really encourage my moms to really focus on now and celebrate the small wins along the way. It doesn't look like everyone else's journey, but there's still so much joy and progress along the way if you can focus on right now.
I love celebrating the small wins.
Yes, that's so important because the small wins lead to the big wins. Yes.
What are some of the most common stressors moms face, and what strategies have you found most helpful?
I think that, the biggest stressors I see are the comparison and the guilt and the feelings of never doing enough. Guilt becomes a constant companion, and so does the pressure to hold everything together. So I think the first strategy is awareness, right? I talked about that. When you catch yourself thinking that you should be doing more. Um, for me, stress isn't something you eliminate. It's something you really kind of learn to dance with. Some days it leads and some days you do. So, also, I always say give yourself permission to say no without guilt because that's really important.
How do you personally recharge and stay grounded while supporting your family and community?
Well, like I said earlier, I recharge by connecting with people who fill my soul, my daughter Maddie, my husband Dave, and close friends, and even the moms in our community. I've built a life that feels aligned with who I am, and that's something that I never take for granted. And I think it honestly keeps me grounded. Um, Seeing moms in our community grow and find their footing reminds me that what I've lived through has purpose.
You're currently writing a book. Can you share what inspired it, who it's for, and what message you hope readers will take away?
Yes, and thank you for bringing that up. I am very excited about it. This book has been on my heart for a very long time. It's called Loving Through the Unexpected. And it's for moms raising autistic children, but also for anyone who has found themselves living a life that looks nothing like they planned. It's about finding strength and surrender and acceptance in the middle of the unexpected. And I wanted to write something that speaks to, kind of the real emotions behind this journey, the love and the grief and the frustration and everything in between. And the inspiration came from years of conversations with moms who said, you put into words what I've never been able to say out loud. And I want this book to do that. I want it to be a voice of honesty and hope for those walking this road. And the truth is, the message is simple. You don't have to love every moment of this, but you can still love your child and your life through it.
Thank you for joining me.
Absolutely, Kayla. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Please share this talk show with your family, friends, clients, and colleagues. Everyone watching, don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and share on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. If you want to be on my show, please reach out anywhere.